Welcome back, everyone. We heard you were hard at work and we cannot wait to hear what you've done. I am going to, first of all, I want to say thank you to Dylan and Lonnie and the ET staff that were in there leading that breakout session. Really appreciate you. And I will hand this back over to Joanna, and we are being joined by two more college mentors, Annie and Romina, and they will lead your Q&A wrap up.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's great to be back with you. I've heard some great things about what was going on, about the work you've been doing already, and I would love to start there before we plan to spend a little bit of time talking to you a little bit more about I want to tell you a little bit about my journey through engineering, and I know Annie and Romina want to talk to you a little bit about why they chose their majors and things like that. But first, we'd love to hear a little bit from you. Is there anyone who would like to share a bit about their design process, or maybe the simulator or the drone coding? Anybody out there? I heard that Challenge Prep might have some really big a competition for some lunch. Is that right? Don't be shy.
Yes, ma'am. And so when we were working on the spreadsheet part of it, where we were doing the distances on the coordinate grid, we had one student who went up to 50 on the activity before it, where they
The
had to
simulator, right? That's amazing.
because he
Whoa.
was hitting them all, like getting them perfect or within 3 kilometers. And so he decided that he wanted to challenge himself. So when we got to the second part with the spreadsheet, I decided to make it a contest to see who could get the shortest distance. And so one student, Brennan, can you come up here real quick, sweetheart? He wanted to look at the map while he was doing it. He didn't want to use the numbers because he was seeing it visually on the map. And then Davion, how did you do yours? On paper. So you drew it out on paper. Did you use just the distances, or did you use the map, like the distances you got from the spreadsheet, or did you visualize it? I visualized. You visualized it. So even though they got the math, they still like to just be able to look at it and see it. And so Brennan's a little bit, he's crashing out a little bit because he had the lead on it, but then Davion overtook him. And so Davion was able to do it in 6,726 kilometers. And so he will be getting DoorDash lunch today. And it's amazing what a simple lunch can do for competition for these young people, because it was on. They were not giving up.
Oh, I love that. And I just want to thank you, Miss Muir, for offering that challenge up to your students, because we so appreciate you coming today and participating through the whole day. But I do know it can be a long stretch for students. So that was an ingenious idea. And I loved hearing, I think what I heard is that being able to visualize the distances and having an awareness of the distances really helped you kind of crack the code for this particular problem. But I know that the traveling salesman problem is used for a lot of complex network. That kind of analysis is used in a lot of complex problem solving. And so I know there would be instances where you wouldn't be able to use sort of your spatial awareness, but I loved it for this application. Annie and Romina, I don't know if you've ever had to do anything where where sort of the visualization was easier than the math. I know in my work, which I'll tell you about in a little bit, is in the construction business, and having programs that allow us to visualize the routing of piping and the placement of equipment ahead of time, of course, you can imagine is extremely beneficial.
Yeah, I feel like in my experience, I I think especially in like earlier level, more fundamental, rudimentary courses, it's been easier to kind of just like work out problems, specifically in coding. But once we kind of moved into higher level, more higher thinking, where the problems aren't exactly, the syntax, right? It's actually like the algorithm or the formula that the route you're taking. It's always been helpful for me to kind of draw it out first. And you might hear this as pseudocode. Everyone kind of does it their own different way. Some people might actually like write out words to like think out their process. But I think like something like traveling salesman problem, it makes sense to kind of visualize it and see, where to kind of start off, especially for, such a difficult problem if you were to go about like a more coding way of solving it. But what about you, Ramina?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we've had to take some basic coding classes, and I feel like with some of them, there's a lot of times where I feel like it's just a bunch of letters and I'm not understanding. But then, like, our professors teach us how to kind of graph them, and then you see how it works, and you're like, wow, like it kind of makes sense, you know? Or like in terms of, I have a civil background, so a lot of times we're doing a lot of calculations, calculating the shear and things like that. And a lot of times you're like, oh, I don't even know like how that would be. But then you go to the lab and then you actually apply forces, you see how they like react, how they work and everything. So always having that visual, I feel like helps, especially if you're a visual learner. Like it makes like it helps click with like what you're actually writing or calculating. So it's really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Does anybody else want to share? Did anybody have a way that they visualize the drone coding or um, any part of this TSP problem that they want to share from any other schools? I'm in Maryland, so anybody in Maryland want to share their one? And I know we have a couple of students joining us all the way from out west, California and Washington State. So don't be shy. And even if you had some questions about things, we'd love to hear about it.
And
Can't
was any
have,
class able to kind of finish the traveling salesman problem and move on to the extra challenges, whether that was with kind of creating your little drone or even the Python section of it? If so, I know those were a bit more difficult and you guys definitely are on a time constraint, but I think that's a really cool activity if you guys have the time.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Annie, because if you do have more time or if you found this really interesting, please do go on and check out some of the extensions for this lab, whether, in class or on your own time, because there's a very cool extension using a neural network that I think you would find super cool, and it's kind of cutting edge computer algorithms. So it will give you a taste of what kind of coding is out there and how it's being used to analyze really complex problems. I'm just going to quickly share and show. Um, I have a few. I think we have this video that shows that one version of the drone flying from place to place. So I'll just play that quickly, just to give you a sense of what you could be working towards. And again, you can see that this is using that glide block that I showed you in the beginning, and using the coordinates, the XY coordinates of the drone. So I hope you have fun with that. And then if you're able to, I hope that you can um, can take the next, there we go. I hope that you can take a look at the Python coding that goes along with that block coding, just to give you a little more insight into how computer algorithms are written and some of the languages that are used. I'll take a little bit of time just to tell you about myself. I told you I was a mechanical engineer by training, but I actually did a dual degree where I studied physics and engineering, and I got a bachelor's degree in both of those. It took me an extra year, 5 years instead of 4 years, but um, I'm really glad I did, because I was fortunate to be able to spend half my career as a mechanical engineer working in the power generation business for a big construction company. And then I spent the other half of my career as a high school educator teaching students just like you. And I taught physics and engineering and helped coordinate the STEM program. And I've been working with Engineering Tomorrow for about the last 5 years and have so loved getting to see new students from all over the country and work on fun challenges and introduce you to the fun of engineering. But what kind of got me into the idea of what I wanted to study when I went to college um, was an idea around that really interested me was around the way that I liked math, but I really liked more applied math, where I could take the math I was learning and apply it to something in the real world. And I pulled up this slide because this was when I took computer science, I think I was a sophomore in college. One of the first coding assignments I had was to find the area under a curve or find the integral of a function. And so if some of you are in calculus right now or pre-calculus and you're just learning about differentiation and integration, one of the things that you might have to do, or even in physics, you probably heard about it from your physics teacher, is finding the area under the curve. And so for me, this problem was really kind of finding the area of what I had to do for this problem was find the area of a whole bunch of rectangles and add them all up together. And that's essentially what your calculus teacher will lead you through when you study integration in high school. And it being able to do that with a computer code and then think that I could do that for any function, even a function that I had no idea what the mathematics of it were. Then I could translate it to perhaps modeling the performance of an engine to make sure that it was performing really well, or modeling the trajectory of a spacecraft to make sure that the energy it was using was in line with what engineers had thought about. So coming up with those kinds of problems and realizing that I could use computer code to model the natural world was something that really excited me. And it connected me with my physics, my interest in physics, and my interest in engineering. And we've had a couple of questions, like what kind of practical applications does solving the traveling salesman problem have? And I want to shout out Mercer High School in Washington State. I'm sorry, Mercer Island High School in Washington State. I think you've seen today, hopefully you've seen today, that this kind of network analysis can be used not just for distances and optimizing or minimizing the distance something would have to travel, but can be used in modeling a network in many other arenas. And another student at Mercer Island asked, how can evolutionary algorithms be used to solve difficult problems like the traveling salesman? Now, Romina and Annie, I don't know if you've heard of evolutionary algorithms, but I had to Google that because my coding background is not as extensive as Annie and Romina's is, but I understand that they are algorithms that kind of continue to evolve and use different traits from the optimum solutions to keep trying to cycle through and find ever better solutions. And, the same is true for this integration problem. This is a pretty simple, straightforward coding problem that maybe one day you're going to get asked to do. But this same problem can now be done with a statistical method called the Monte Carlo method. Here again, this is a statistical program using a random numbers to determine the area of under a curve in a function, the red area in this picture. And then I just found this picture, which was using the traveling salesman problem. So the same kind of mathematics, that graph theory with nodes and edges, but doing it in 3 dimensions. And again, you can see that you get a spatial reference to it, but you can see that it's becomes much more complex, much quicker, the more nodes that you have. So I wanted to say, doing doing math in high school, you sort of wonder, when am I going to use this again? What am I going to do? But if you can start seeing how it applies to real world problems, I think it's going to really make it so much more interesting to you. And you can see that it is used in so many different arenas. So I'm going to turn it over to Annie next, who's going to tell you a little bit about her journey coming out of high school.
Yeah, hi guys. So, really quick, brief overview before I get into some details. My name is Annie. I'm currently a senior at the University of Notre Dame, so I'll be graduating this May. I have two majors here. I have computer science and economics, and then more recently, I decided to pick up a minor in Chinese as well. I actually helped work on this lab when I was interning, which I'll tell you guys about in next slides. But basically, as Ramita and I kind of introduced ourselves, love for you to, think of anything you might want to ask us, whether that might be related to high school experiences, college experiences, out in the real world, truly, truly anything. So what am I up to, right? Prior to coming to college, I was in high school for 4 years back in New Orleans. And throughout this time, it was a time of exploration. I didn't exactly have anything, specific in mind that I wanted to do. I actually thought that I was gonna come into college pre-med, and so I kind of focused a lot of my um, extracurriculars on that. However, when I was, actually entering college and thinking about like, I think that's when you kind of start thinking, oh my gosh, we have, what's my next 15 years of life gonna look like? I found myself, not as passionate about medicine as I thought I was. I didn't like the work-life balance it would have given me, especially for my 20s. So just for those personal reasons, I kind of decided, maybe put medicine on the back burner, right? Like if I decide that that's something that I actually want to do, I can always go back to med school. So therefore, I kind of thought about what my strengths were, what type of homework assignments I enjoyed, and just where to start off, right? And so I actually started with computer engineering as my major. This being that, number one, I've always, been pretty good at like problem solving, logical problems, and enjoyed that more than like maybe writing essays. And so computer science market is also, pretty good. And then furthermore, like if I were to, pivot into any other field, it's easier pivoting out of engineering than it is pivoting into engineering. So this is my thought process. I started out and then I decided I don't really care about the electrical engineering part of computer engineering. I decided just to stick with computer science. I realized with my advisor that I could actually, switch things up and also pick up something else. So I decided to study economics. This was just primarily because I enjoyed like my economics courses in high school, and I also felt like it could give me a very nuanced resume in terms of applying for jobs, having kind of a both like real world business background and a technical background. So after my freshman year, I luckily found an internship, more so on that econ side of things, and I was in New York City doing finance. Really great, rewarding experience, I think personally. From from a professional perspective, I'd realized that I, wanted nothing to do with the finance world essentially. It just wasn't, the right culture for me. And ultimately, I didn't think it would fit into my life very well. The next summer, I actually worked with Engineering Tomorrow, which is the great company that was working with you guys today here. And we helped develop some labs, which including this one. So if you guys do end up doing, especially like the Python section, I had a pretty big part in helping out with that. Following that, this in the fall of my junior year, which would have been about over a year ago now, I was studying abroad in London, actually. So if you guys have questions about studying abroad and all that, please ask. But while I was there, I got the opportunity to intern at Mars Wrigley. Mars Wrigley is essentially that one of those like really big companies that you don't really know what they make, but they make a bunch of the candies that you might love. So like Snickers and Twix and all that. So I got to work with them in marketing, and this was just kind of like a random like off to the side. Let's see if I enjoy it. Got this opportunity, and it was really cool, and I really enjoyed it. But marketing ultimately is not for me. And then this past summer, I was actually working at PwC, which is a large consulting firm. Now, consulting is a field where I think a lot of people are like, what do consultants do, And even, now I would tell you that it's a lot of things that you can't really explain unless you're actually in the project. But essentially, I was doing technical consulting. So we were helping a company essentially like move data platforms from like an old-fashioned way into like a more like advanced um, cloud system. That's the very general thing there, but I had done a little bit of consulting within clubs here at Notre Dame, and so I decided to check out tech consulting. Now, finally, postgraduate, so when I graduate in May, shortly after, I'll be starting at my full-time role, which will be at McDonald's, and it is a global technology rotational program in Chicago. And for 2 years, essentially, I'll be switching from every 8 months to different sectors within technology. So, one rotation might be cybersecurity, one might be, I don't know, product management, whatever it might be. And so I'm really excited for that. Outside of school, I've been pretty active in the ultimate frisbee community, pick that up as well. And most recently as well, I've gotten more involved within the Asian community here at Notre Dame and participating in showcases and running events for that. I know it's a ton of verbiage I just spit at you, but I'm going to pass it off to Romina to introduce herself.
Yeah, before we go, Annie, could I just ask, do you think you're in your role in McDonald's, do you think you're going to be doing anything sort of related to this kind of optimization and, I don't know, looking at supply chain of the quarter pounder and I don't know things.
I mean, I think most definitely. I think in every single technical field, no matter where you are, there is some sort of value in optimization, right? At the end of the day, like when it's coming to maximizing profit, things like that, we're going to be trying to think of, how can we make processes faster? How can we automate certain things? And so, traveling salesman problem is obviously like a short, example or small example of this, but like, if we're trying to deliver, I don't know, every single patty or something to different franchises, we have to think about, the most optimal and cost-effective way to do that. And so I don't know specifically if I'm gonna get to work on Big Mac, but like hopefully, something will be of interest and I'll be able to work on something like this.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's Big Mac's my favorite, but I also think sustainability within a supply chain is becoming much more important and much more examined and tried to optimize. So, well, now we're going to hear from Romina, who is a student at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, thank you, Annie, for sharing all of your like the things you've done. It was awesome to hear about it. But kind of introducing myself, my name is Romina, and I'm a senior at Virginia Tech. So I'll also be graduating in May 2025. Here at Virginia Tech, I'm double majoring in civil engineering and Spanish, and that Spanish was a little addition that wasn't planned initially. So actually, if we go into the next slide, I'll kind of explain my journey and how I ended up choosing to double major. So obviously it all started off in high school where I took AP classes and I try to make sure that I'm involved in extracurriculars, whether it was sports or honor societies or things of that sort. Because those things are important. They give you experience, but also they're things that you can talk about when you're applying for colleges. So that's definitely something that you guys should keep in mind. But also in my senior year of high school, we had this program where you got to shadow a bunch of professionals in fields that you were interested in. And back then, I was very interested in studying architecture. So I went and shadowed an architect. And although it was really fun and everything, but I realized that it's not really exactly what I wanted. So then, because I was a COVID grad, like my senior year of high school was during COVID, so I ended up going to community college, and just because everything was online. And so at community college, I worked as a student ambassador. Again, I still like participated in extracurriculars and made sure that I was taking all the courses that I needed so that I could transfer to a four-year university. So if you guys have any questions about taking that route, I can definitely help out. And then ultimately I switched over to Virginia Tech and I was studying civil engineering all throughout, even when I was at community college. And then there was a Spanish class offered that was Spanish for construction. And I took that because I had done previous internships with Whiting Turner, which is a construction company. And I thought that was what I was really interested in within civil engineering. And so I took Spanish and I really loved it. And so I decided to turn it into a minor, and then that minor ended up being a major. So now here I am with double majors, and because of it, I've been able to study abroad here at Virginia Tech. I've done 3 study abroad programs. One of them was in engineering. It was called Bridges, Builders, and Society, where I got to go to Italy, Switzerland, and Austria, visiting a bunch of bridges, which was really fun. And then I've done 2 other study abroads for Spanish, and those were going to Spain and Costa Rica, which was really fun. I have some pictures over there for you guys. And then while also I've been doing my undergrad studies, I've been mentoring with Engineering Tomorrow, which I've loved so much. And every time I feel like I'm learning something new also. And then I've just been, participating in so many extracurriculars such as Engineers Without Borders, Design Build, Steel Bridge. And these are great ways for you guys. Like, this was my attempt of trying to get some practical experience while I was in college, just because I feel like a lot of classes are so focused on theoretical learning that you don't really get those hands-on experiences until you're like senior year. So it's definitely an important way to kind of build your resume, but also gain those practical experiences. And then now I have applied for grad school and I've gotten in, so I'll continue on with my grad school degree in structural engineering. But I know that was a lot, but if you guys have any questions about studying abroad, about going to community college, or anything about grad school even, I am definitely here to help.
Thanks so much, Romina. We did get one question in ahead of time, and maybe both you and Annie could think about this one, which was, are there ways to do computer science in high school? Like maybe getting some, I was thinking maybe getting some certification, but through some online courses and things like that. But are there ways to do a computer science type job when you're in high school, do you think?
Yeah, so I would say a job might be harder. Like, I don't know if many people are going to be asking you for freelance help if you're in high school. Um, but I would say as the computer science job market gets much more and more competitive, which in all honesty, it is insane right now, um, getting started earlier is truly, for your benefit. If some schools offer a computer science class, I don't think that's like a lot of schools though, but if it does, that's great. Doesn't, some schools will have coding clubs, CS clubs, related things like that, where you can get some practice. But if you don't have like the access to those resources, honestly, like there's so many free things online. I would say YouTube, but honestly, if you look for like pretty elite colleges, like I think Harvard has a CS50 course that is pretty popular. You can enroll in it for free, and then if you want the certification, it's like you pay some money for the certification, but you can also just write on your resume that you completed it, in my opinion. And having that kind of like scheduled like assignments and like weekly lectures or whatever can really help you. I think another great way to just get started is just search up like a project to do, I think a lot of times when people think project, you think you have to like do it all yourself, but there's so many like step-by-step tutorials. And when you really get that hands-on, project work, I think you'll start to connect the dots on like where everything is kind of leading and matters towards each other. So those are the things that I recommend the most. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can also add a little bit. I didn't know that this was a thing until much later. But there's like a possibility of doing dual enrollment. I mean, I'm sure that depends on the school as well, and you'd have to talk to your like advisor or school counselor. But that is also another option where you can take courses in community college that would actually count towards your like I guess your high school courses, but then also when you go to college, they also count like satisfy those requirements that you need to take as well. So that's something that you could look into as well.
That's great advice. And one other thing that I thought of that you both reminded me of is the site GitHub, I feel like if you are interested and maybe you have a problem, you're trying to think about solving a computer coding problem you're thinking about solving, GitHub is this great open community where users share open source software that can maybe help you get a start on something and you can improve on something. So that's another idea you could look at. Romina, you mentioned something that I thought was also really great advice, which was that you shadowed professionals when you were in high school and that I think you said you had a program in your high school, but did you have to reach out to professionals or what was involved there? Because I do think that's a great way to get a little taste of what it might be like to have a certain profession.
Absolutely, yeah. So apart from that being something that was offered in my high school, my dad really pushed for me to do this. And I was fortunate enough that he had friends in like civil engineering and also architecture where I was able to talk to them and reach out to them. But honestly, at the time when I was a high schooler, I hated doing it and reaching out to people and asking, hey, can I shadow you? Can I talk to you? But honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, like it literally changed um like my whole entire like undergrad journey because then I didn't have to switch so much like when I was in college. Not that there's any issue with that, but just getting to kind of understand the roles and responsibilities of something that I thought I wanted to do, and then realizing if it's actually a good fit or not. And so I did have to reach out to a bunch of people. And, there's going to be times where people don't respond to you because they're so busy, they get so many emails. So even sometimes I remember I had to email them again. But yeah, you can always like even I don't know, I feel like with that kind of stuff, even if you have like a peer in your class whose parents are doing something in the field that you're interested in, that could also be another way that you can approach it and just be like, hey, can I like talk to you? Or just, I think being curious about um what each job entails, I don't think there's any issue with that. And I think it's definitely I highly encourage it.
I agree, and I think even having the experience of viewing a professional environment as a high school student and learning how to sort of navigate in that professional environment through a few shadow experiences is so valuable. But I think with all that said, you certainly do not have to have it all figured out in high school. And as Annie and Romina have shown, they came in with certain ideas about majors, but they've been able to shift and adjust as they've learned more about them. And so I think that's something to also take to heart that no one decision you make, whether it's the college you go to or the major that you choose, is really gonna fix you on a certain path. There's still opportunities to change and adjust and find the things that are interesting you most and things you haven't even imagined yet. I mean, I think there's going to be jobs out there that we haven't even been able to think up yet, that you all will be able to become experts at. So I put a slide up here to just inspire you to perhaps ask any questions. If there's anybody who has a question for Annie or Romina or me, we would love to have them. Yeah, I like this one about major differences between high school and college. I mean, for me, I was the first girl in my family to go to college, so that step up from high school to college was a huge developmental step for me. I had a big adjustment. Do you have, Romina and Annie, do you have any advice about sort of how you navigated that adjustment from high school to college?
Go ahead, Amy.
I was just gonna say, I think that one of my biggest things was, I think when I was in high school, I felt like the people who were around me kind of represented everyone there ever could be in my life, right? So I was in a class of like 250 seniors, back in high school. And in my head, I was like, oh, like everyone's kind of like this, and then I thought if people aren't like this, then like I might not be able to be friends with them. I don't think, we're gonna agree on a lot of issues. And et cetera, et cetera. And so I came into college with a more narrow-minded type of perspective, like thinking like I have to seek out these type of people because that's who I know I'm gonna be good friends with, right? And then not really bother to become friends with people who, grew up very, very different than I did. Whereas I think the reality, or what I should have thought, is like you don't actually know who you're going to get along with and what valuable lessons, valuable friendships you can gain from talking to people who you might not think you'll get along with automatically. And that can be said for people, it can be said for clubs, right? Like I joined ultimate frisbee, I've never done that in my life, and I didn't really have a stereotype about it, but like I just had no thought to do it. But just going to the first practice like completely changes my perspective. Um, so really, try not to have like a closed-minded image on things because when you go to school, a new school, potentially in a different part of the country with, not 200, not 500 students, but 9,000 students, you're bound to like have a lot of new experiences, a lot of new faces. And the only way to really gain from that and better your life, I think, is to go in it with a very like yes mindset rather than, shutting down any potential prospects or ideas.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like when we're in high school, the world is much smaller and we think that that's everything there is. But when you go to college, there's so many people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different just everything. And so you get exposed to so much diversity, so and whatever it is. And so I think being open to it is a great thing, but also I feel like another thing that I personally experienced switching from being a high schooler to college was the responsibilities. I definitely had a lot more responsibilities. And obviously that is different for every person, but I had to get a job when I was, in college. And so trying to balance that on top of classes and also being involved and these kind of things was something that you don't always hear about or think about even when you're in high school. It's definitely something to keep in mind and know because I feel like it makes the transition a little smoother to be aware of that.
Such great advice from both of you. I couldn't agree more. And I want to show just some pathways through to an engineering degree, a computer science degree. Um, so you can see here a number of routes you can take. You can Romina and I both did something where we kind of went to two schools. Romina went to a community college at the beginning and then transferred to an engineering school. I went to a liberal arts school and then transferred to an engineering school. And by going through to in a 2-year program, you can come out with a degree early on and you can start to work and start to see the kinds of jobs that you're interested in, and then maybe take some time to go and get your 4-year degree. Oftentimes, once you're employed in a tech firm, those employers will pay for your continuing education as well. So those are some pathways that you can take, and you can see them here on the slide. So we're just posting those, and you'll see this in your student workbook as well. And then finally, I think getting involved with something you heard from both Romina and Annie, and using corporations and using at school organizations. I think we heard Romina say Engineers Without Borders, and Annie, I know you've been involved in a number of organizations. So do you both want to just talk a little bit about what this feels like when you're at college?
Yeah, I think in high school it might not feel like there's like a ton of opportunities. Like I was lucky enough to go to a high school with a good number of clubs. And by good numbers, couple tens maybe. But some of them pretty small, not really active. I think college, almost every single like organization I can think of is like relatively active and there's a ton of them for such like niche things. Like in high school you might just have like one like big science interest club. Here there's like probably like 20 of them, just based on different niche of interest, whether you want to go into robotics, whether or not what you want to go into, just for computer science, there's probably like two or three. And then for mechanical engineering, do you want to build a robot? Do you want to build a spaceship? Do you want to build whatever? There's like so many different types. So I think you can really expect that when you go into college, that you're going to have a lot more opportunity to really find your specific interest. Because even if you want to do, let's say, mechanical engineering, I think it's going to be difficult for you to, really decide on which aspect of it you want to go into, or the practicalities of, what your job will be, unless you do these organizations, Um, but so, okay, sorry, you guys disappeared from my screen, so I thought that people were cutting out. Um, but yeah, so essentially, look forward to that and get involved early. It's going to provide you, so much knowledge, so many connections, and so much, I think, perspective into what your life could be.
Yeah, and I already kind of touched on this with the fact that being involved in these kind of organizations helps you like make the connection between theoretical and practical aspects of what you're learning. But at the same time, another thing is that, there's so many options, but also if there aren't any that you're interested in, you have the opportunity to create your own like club, and attract other students to it. And I think that's something that's great because it also shows like leadership, which is something that's very important, especially when we're talking about like later down the road when you're applying for jobs and things of that sort. So definitely they're good things to look into. And I know at least at Virginia Tech, the way we do it is that we have Gobbler Fest in the beginning of each semester where all organizations are there. They have their booths and you get to talk to them. And they're kind of like organized by like engineering, like cultural and different things of that sort. And so taking advantage of those kind of events would be great for you guys to become more involved.
Such great advice, Romina and Annie. Thank you so much for sharing what you've learned. And I really wish you're both seniors. I wish you so much luck as you move into this next chapter. You both have very bright new horizons that you're heading to. So well done. As far as the students who have completed this challenge, you have learned some great skills today. You've learned about the traveling salesman problem. You've learned a little bit about network theory and the mathematics behind it, graph theory. You've learned to think about optimization problems, and you've had a little taste of coding as well, or you will have a little taste of coding. So well done. And I'm just going to skip ahead to say thank you so much. And I'm also very excited to be able to introduce our keynote speaker. And so I just want to say thank you again to Romina and Annie. Thank you so much, and thank you to all the students who participated today. And well done, Challenge Prep. I forget the student who gets the lunch, but that's amazing. I'm going to now, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Rakib Jamil. He is a fellow, you may remember I went to Georgia Tech. We got a fellow Georgia Tech grad. Rakib graduated from Georgia Tech in 2020 with a degree in industrial engineering, specializing in data science. He has been a lifelong sports enthusiast and especially Atlanta teams. So I feel like I thought we had an Atlanta school joining us today. Is that right, Jillian? I thought so. And
yes, we have
awesome. Okay, and Rakib achieved one of his dreams of joining the data science team at the NBA and the WNBA, where he combines his passion for sports with his expertise for data analysis. You're going to learn a lot more about Rakib in the next few minutes, but please, everybody, let's give a big hand and warmly welcome Rakib.
Great. Thank you all for having me. I am so excited to be here. As you can see, I'm a huge sports guy. I have the WNBA jacket, big Atlanta guy here. So shout out to everyone, but particularly I see there's a Georgia high school here. So
Go Braves, go Braves.
Braves. still dream, everyone. So thank you again for having me. I really was excited for this opportunity because I was also obviously a high school student. I knew I wanted to do some engineering. I had no idea what engineering even meant, but this is kind of a bit of my story on what brought me to my dream job. I also opened the floor up to anyone. I don't want this to feel like I'm just talking about myself this entire time. Anyone feel free to interrupt me at any point and ask any questions, but I'll get right into it. My journey to engineering from curiosity to career. So who am I? I already talked a lot about Atlanta. So let's talk about something else. I'm a huge Mario guy. I love Mario Party, Super Smash Bros, Mario Kart. So if you want to challenge me, you can, and you will lose. My fun facts is that I was ranked 11th in 2K9, so that might date me a little bit, but NBA 2K9, I was ranked 11th in the world. I just played all the time as a middle schooler, and I somehow found my way to the 11th place in the world. And second, fun fact is I have a podcast. So you see this image right here, threes only. That is myself. Those are not my real arms. But we basically during COVID time, me and my friends decided to create this podcast, talk about basketball. And I actually want to show you guys. It's on Apple Podcasts, so please feel free to give it a listen. It has 5 stars from 27 people. Are those 27 people all of my friends who I've forced to give me a high review? Potentially. But I definitely recommend if you guys want to give it a listen to, check it out. And it's actually pretty funny when I interviewed for the WNBA NBA. This was actually like one of my major talking points where I was like, oh, I have an NBA podcast. And then the interview went from being a technical interview to 20 minutes talking about what my podcast is about. So you never know. Maybe if you want to have a side passion, it could help you in an interview for whatever job you're looking to do. But all my life, I wanted to make the NBA. But then I remember seeing this dunk from Vince Carter. I'm not sure if it's gonna load, but I remember watching this or a highlight of this, and Vince Carter steals the ball and he jumps over someone to dunk the ball. And at that point, I knew I was gonna make the NBA based on my pure athletic ability. I did not have that at all. So I had to find some other way, which was through data. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So to what my position is right now, I'm a data product manager at the WNBA. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means and how I got to this position. But here's a spark that lit the flame. So as you can see, I was destined to be a hooper. I had the basketball in my hand. Big Kobe fan. This was me in 8th grade posing by myself with a selfie in my room. And this was me in 9th grade with a crazy awkward smile. But I knew I always had a curiosity on how to fix things, but I didn't know what that really meant. My dad was an engineer, he was a mechanical engineer. So I naturally was just like, oh, I want to do engineering, but what exactly is engineering? I knew I was somewhat good with numbers. I enjoyed math classes. But honestly, a lot of what made me the man I am today, or the professional I am today, is mainly the failures. So, and that's honestly the biggest reason I wanted to speak today. I was not a good student at all. I failed lots of classes. And particularly, there's one moment in life in eighth. So I went to a high school. I went to a charter STEM school. Basically, what you had to do was you had to have your 8th grade math teacher basically sign a form, basically saying, "Hey, this student qualifies for this school and they do well in this high school." And I remember asking my 8th grade teacher if she could give me a recommendation. And in her defense, she had a valid reason to not believe in me because I was not doing well in her class. But I remember specifically, she kind of grilled me. She kind of was just like, "No, you're not going to do well at this school. You don't do well in this course. You don't pay attention. There's no way you're going to succeed here." And she wanted to talk to my parents. And I remember my parents were still head down saying like, you should still go to the STEM school. But I think that's where a lot of my doubt started creeping in, where I realized, this is the first time someone explicitly said I can't do something. So that was definitely a big motivation and a driver to start picking things up in school. So fast forward a little bit, I did get into the STEM high school, so by lottery base. And you'd think I would do really well in 9th and 10th grade, but I continued my road of not doing well in classes. I failed chemistry, I failed physics, I even failed Spanish 1, which at my school was like literally the easiest class. So it was actually that was and I had to go to summer school, and that's when I realized like, shoot, maybe I really am like something's off. Like I'm not putting in this isn't a good representation of me. And I think as a lot of high school, I'm sure a lot of you can relate. It feels like GPA and test scores and grades are like the most important thing. And I remember I had a 2.4 or something around that range, which would not get me into the schools I wanted to get into. And I started having the realization of, okay, if I don't get my stuff together, um, maybe I won't be able to achieve what I want to achieve. So um, I I slowly started to decide on like building a foundation. So after 10th grade, I saw my grades, I saw what I failed, I saw summer school, and I realized, okay, now it's the time to get back and start really putting an effort into school and prioritizing. So I talked a bit about the teacher who doubted me, but I don't want that to be the focus. I think what's most important is the support system I had from my parents to teachers that did believe in me. I remember one teacher in particular, Mr. Van Plu. He's probably one of the most influential people in my life because he was my ninth grade AP Human Geography teacher, and he used to call me five. So I think the AP exam, the score is 1 to 5. So five being the highest score. And he had so much belief that I do well in his class that he just called me five. He wouldn't call me by my name. And at the end of ninth grade, I took the AP exam and I come back and I see I got a 1 on the exam. I'm like, what is going on? And I was so embarrassed because I thought that he would just see less of me because I didn't do well. And I remember being shy going into school the next following year. And he didn't judge me at all. He knew that I was probably more upset about the low score than anyone else. And I think that meant a lot to me because I felt like a lot of the times if I did if I did poorly in a teacher's class, they would think less of me as a human or like as a person. But that really made me realize like, wait, teach like we're all people at the end of the day, you know. So whether that's like one of my big pieces of advice that if you ever feel nervous about a presentation or talking to someone, regardless of like if they're president or vice president, professor, teacher, at the end of the day, we're all people, right? Like we all, at the end of the day, this is just a job, this is a career, but we all are all people and we relate on that one aspect of life. So don't be nervous. And I think that teacher, Mr. Van Plu, made me realize that people do care about me, and my parents and my family all continue to believe in me. So I really started focusing on school. I got into Georgia State with the goal of going to Georgia Tech, and I eventually transferred after 2 years of Georgia State to Tech. And at Tech, I studied industrial engineering. I to the point earlier, I knew I wanted to go to engineering school, and industrial engineering specifically stood out to me because I love the idea of processes and making things efficient. That's basically the concept of industrial engineers. They like to make things efficient. So similar to the traveling salesman, like trying to optimize what route is the most effective route or why certain queues and lines at airports are the way they are. That a lot of that is from industrial engineering and trying to understand why things flow the way they do. So that's kind of my overall educational path. Experience, I have a wide range. If you guys know Ross, it's like a department store. I worked at Ross and Apple. I'm gonna put them both in the same category where I was in a customer facing role, and that obviously taught a lot of patience. A lot of different customers, were obviously upset when it came. Like basically, my job for Apple was just like if anyone's device was not working, they'd come to me and be like, "Hey, you're the reason it's not working. Fix it." So I definitely dealt with a lot of like frustrating customers, which taught me how to, be patient, try to be understanding, and learn how to talk to a lot of different folks. I remember at Ross, I would play a game with myself where if for new customers, I would try like a different word. I'd be like, "What's up, boss?" I never say boss, but I would just try that with different customers just to like put myself out of my comfort zone and just try different things. So I definitely learned how to speak and be a little more patient with people. With internships, I saw that internship is probably what I recommend the most for students. I work at a company called Westrock. They basically are supply management. They're one of the leading companies for like packaging. So if you look at a box or some plastic or paper cups, you might see the Westrock logo. This was probably the coolest part of my life this early on in my career because that was the first time I moved away from home. I lived in Virginia for for about a summer, and that was the first time. What I would recommend everyone to do if you have the opportunity to live on your own and learn a little bit more about yourself, I definitely recommend going for internship because it teaches you more about yourself. Obviously, you're going to learn more about like professional experience and how day to day in the office looks, but it more importantly teaches you about yourself. You know, as you slowly become an adult, what do you enjoy doing? How do you cook this? How do you do that? And like really building your work ethic. So I definitely recommend an internship. And and then I worked at AT&T, and I learned a little bit about data. That's where I probably realized that, oh, data in particular is what stands out to me. And I eventually got into the MBA, WNBA. How I got here was I slid into a lot of LinkedIn DMs. I messaged a lot of people on LinkedIn, basically saying like, hey, this is what I do. And luckily, one of them responded. And from there, I eventually got an interview, and that's kind of where it all came from. So it all really happened from me just talking and knowing someone or talking to someone on LinkedIn. And from there, the role I actually got was a role that didn't exist before. I was just kind of referred naturally. So that's kind of where I live. Now, how did I turn into my education into what I actually love, which is data and sports? So I remember seeing this graphic of them comparing Kobe to a black mamba, which is his nickname, but I thought that was hilarious because like, wow, what an interesting way to tell data. And it made me think like, wow, a lot of a big part of data storytelling is you get to control, not control, but you get to show the audience what you want to show in a way with proven facts, right? Like we learn a lot about pie charts, bar charts, which is the most effective visualization for whatever story you're trying to say. But what really fascinated me with sports and data is that everything we do is through data, right? Every single thing we have in life, whether it's the grocery store layout, understanding what sells the most, the placement of where these items are, or field goal range, right? Like, why is it that certain players shoot X percentage from 3-point line versus like inside the paint? Everything we do in life has some form of data assigned to it. And I thought that was really interesting. And I wanted to apply it more to sports and what I love. So that's what loved me. Well, that's why I love data. Here I am giving a sick pass to the camera. Where I am today, the day in the life at the league, every day is different, you know. This we have a really cool office. I work a lot on different data products, and on the next slide, I'll actually show you an example of one of the visualizations I created. But I specifically work on the WNBA, which kind of leads into my next point, which is goals. Being a part of such growth at a league that feels like it's even bigger than basketball is what drives me. I believe in the product, I believe in the players, I believe in the leadership. And honestly, seeing so much growth with the WNBA has been inspiring. It keeps me going. Being one of the main data stakeholders or owners for an entire league is definitely something special. So I hope to continue to grow it and hopefully be a part of something bigger than just basketball. And the best part about working about the leagues is probably getting some fresh gear, you know. We get to go to a lot of games. I got to be on like Times Square, like image. I was holding the basketball. This was just like when we opened up the NASDAQ bell. And the best part is about working at the league is feeling that my opinion can be shared with anyone at leadership. Kathy Engelbert's our commissioner. And the fact that she even knows me is such a like cool fact that I still like can't believe. So I feel like if there's any um thing that I think the league can do better, I can talk to the direct person. So having that visibility from leadership is always cool, and feeling like leadership actually cares about what I have to say is always super fascinating to me. So that's probably my favorite part about working at the leagues. And here's a data example. So I talked a lot about what data is, data storytelling. This is kind of an example of like what is a sample of the project I built. So if you follow the W, you kind of know that Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, there was a big resurgent this past year. And with that, there were a lot of new fans. But what we want to understand more of like, who are these fans? Are these younger fans? What are they interested in? How can we make their viewing experience not be just a one-time view? We want it to be a continuation with him. We don't want someone just to watch a game and then never come back to the W. We want to really understand and make the fans experience as enjoyable as possible. So this is kind of an example of like trying to understand what our fans like to do, who they are. And we eventually created this this like analysis, which is basically showing like, oh, which products are working well? Is the app working well? Is the website working better? How many people are buying jerseys, right? These are all different data sets. And I think that's what's oftentimes really fascinating but difficult with data. I think a lot of the times in school we're shown like, hey, this is your data set. Oh, make this visualization. But there's a lot that comes to it. You can see watch right here. This is viewership data, right? Then there's interact. This is all-star voting. This is all-star data. Then there's attend, which is fanatics or whatever merchandise ticketing team we have. So these are all different data sources that we are trying to bring into one unified central place. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge of what I own at the W is trying to understand, okay, we have 100 different data sources. How do we bring this into one, up to, like one view like this, which basically like highlights and gives you a summary so Kathy can see, oh, so this is how we're performing in this place or how we're not doing well in this place. This is kind of like the overall data flow. This is just like very general. And I think it applies to a lot of like major companies, but the step that a lot of times school teaches or just not, or just like what we're always taught with different analysis classes, probably like this last step, which is building dashboards on a Power BI, a Tableau, an Excel, etc., a PowerPoint. But there's so much that goes into data. There's a data engineering team here. There's a data governance team here. There's stakeholders. There's a cloud engineer. There's so many different people and skill sets that are required to get to this point of 100 plus 127% time view. And I think that's what really fascinated too, where I want to know, how do we get to these numbers? Like, it's not as simple as like this table just exists. We want to be able to understand how we got to the point. So I thought this whole flow was really, really fascinating to me. So all in all, I talked a lot about myself. My main takeaways, something I wish I knew as a student, is not to take life too seriously. I mentioned before, I remember when I was failing my classes, I really had a lot of doubt in if I was going to do anything in life and getting a job. And I thought GPA, I was comparing myself to everyone around me. And I think the biggest takeaway that I had is like, everyone has a different journey. Don't compare yourself to someone getting this internship or this job. Like, it's only going to make you feel worse, but we all have different journeys. We all have different roadblocks. We all have different experiences. So what I think, I know it's easier said than done. I definitely struggle with it myself to this day. You know, there's not going to be a time in life where you're just like, yep, that's it. Everything is perfect now. There's not ever that time. And just continue, keep going. Life is short. So just like keep pushing, you know, and set little goals. Little wins is always nice. I love finding an excuse to celebrate myself. So whether that's creating an agenda after by the end of the week, organizing your calendar, or getting an A on a specific project. I think the little wins, you'll slowly start to accumulate and realize, oh, wow, that was actually a really big one of mine. Because we always talk about like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do with your career? And I somehow, even when I was making this presentation, I was like, oh, it feels like I achieved my dream without even knowing I did. And that's because they're like, life just happens naturally. So set little goals. Give yourself credit. Even being here is a win in my book. So continue to celebrate yourself. Ask questions. Engineering, I think the main engineers are who they are because of why they ask the why. They ask that why and the how, as opposed to just accepting what is. If there's a more efficient or effective way of solving something, do it, you know? And there's no right or wrong way of doing anything. I think what makes the most successful, at least in the business world, I'd say when I'm hiring for like an intern or anyone, I'm always always more interested in the candidates who ask me a question of my question. Like, why did I ask that question? Or what are you looking to achieve? As opposed to just like answering the question. Because that to me shows that they're not only going to do what's asked for them in their job responsibility, but it actually shows that they're thinking about why they're doing what they're doing. And I think a lot of times in school or just growing up, we're always told that this assignment is due on this date. But we should do the assignment, obviously, but also look into like, why are we doing this? What is this going to serve me later on? So keep asking questions and finally say yes. Say yes to things in terms of like, obviously things that are beneficial to you in your career. But I think a lot of the times I overthought every little engagement slash opportunity. For example, student council, I remember I was like, I'm not qualified. I'm not a smart student. I should not even apply for student council. But part of me kind of wishes I just said yes. Who cares? Like at least I would know. I would give myself a chance. A lot of times, if there's like a networking event or something like that, I'm overall pretty shy guy and I don't like networking events. But once I'm there, yeah, I always end up liking events more than I do or thought I would. So I'd say yes to things. Worst case, you didn't enjoy it and you don't do it again. So say yes to opportunities and meet as many people as you can. So final one, and then I'll stop talking. Your turn to engineer the future. I talked about a little bit, just like put yourself out there, be comfortable. Networking, I hate the term networking, but I would love the biggest thing for my success is like having mentors who believed in me and asking people questions on like how did they get to where they are today and what can I do. So continue to try to find mentors, reach out to me, reach out to anyone, and just have that network, because if I didn't reach out to people, I wouldn't be at my dream job right now. Learn programs, tools. I was hesitant to put programs and tools because I remember out of high school, I was like, I don't know Python 100%. I don't know SQL 100%. Will I do well in the workforce? And it all worked out. So I say that to say learn tools, but like the foundation. Don't feel like you have to learn a tool to be successful. I think the biggest thing that I look for, or like I think has helped me, is just being able to be a problem solver and being reliable. I think that's what people like working on. They like working with people who they can trust to do work. They're going to ask questions and be curious. So just be a problem solver and be reliable. And develop non-technical skills, talked about that already. Network, understand what you're good at. If there's something you're not good at that you want to become good at, teach yourself, be self-motivated. And finally, be informed. I just think it's important to be yourself and authentic in general. To obviously as being as respectful as possible, but I think a lot of the times we don't raise our hand for certain questions, or we feel like we're the only ones not understanding something. So and we have a feeling that, oh, everyone's understanding, I'm not understanding, I'm just not going to ask the question. But teach yourself, have an opinion. It's okay to be yourself and don't feel like you have to change because you feel that other people are different. It's okay to be yourself and be unique. So I want to finish off on being the sports guy. Obviously, this quote, don't be a player. Don't just be a player, be the one who changes the game. Take ownership of your life. Life is not that serious and it's all going to work out. Just keep working hard. And thank you all for listening to me. And I hope if there are any questions you have, please let me know. And please reach out, network, listen to the podcast if you want. You don't have to. But yeah, thank you again for having me.
Wow, Rakib, that was amazing. I took so many notes and I have so many sound bites from what you said, but I do want to allow other students and schools to ask questions. And I know we have a couple in the chat already. And one of them is sort of how you chose your major. How did you pick industrial over other types of engineering? And maybe then what was the most difficult step of that? I know you went to Georgia State first and then Georgia Tech, so I imagine there was a big transition there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I chose industrial engineering because I always wondered why certain things were the way they were. Like I always bring this up with like Atlanta has is one of the, I think it's the busiest airport in the world, right? And I always wonder like how in the world do we get through security so well? Like everything is so plain. I always thought that was fascinating. I chose industrial engineering because I wanted to know the how behind what makes this line in security go fast. That's a very specific example, but I think in general, growing up, the how is always something I was curious about. Uh, in terms of my journey from Georgia State actually didn't have an industrial or an engineering program. So I just majored in math. I was like, oh, math is numbers and statistics. That's the closest thing I have. But to be honest, I kind of just like I had no idea. I kind of just picked a major to pick a major, and I slowly just became industrial engineer. So I think at no point did I think industrial engineering was going to lead me to MBA, but I just think naturally Georgia Tech was a good engineering school. I was a pretty curious person, and that's something it kind of became what it became. And I think the transferring of schools was definitely a challenge. Um, it was one of those I felt like I was back in high school where I felt like I was the dumbest kid in the school, and I was definitely struggling academically. But what was different about Georgia Tech versus like high school is that Georgia Tech, I was actively trying and I was learning. And though I didn't get necessarily get A's at Georgia Tech, I still was learning. And I got some C's, I admit it. I'll admit everyone, I got some C's, got a D here and there, but I learned. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think a lot of times in high school, I was just doing classes to check it off. I was just signing up for experiences just to put it on my resume. And I wish I didn't do that. I kind of wish I just like did what I cared about, regardless of if it goes on my resume or not. But I think a lot of the times we as like students are taught like, oh, you have to do X, Y, and Z to be successful. But we all have different journeys. So um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there is a little too much emphasis on, I've got to take this class, I have to have this many APs if I want to go to this school, etc. And I do think if you have an interest in a class, you're going to do 100 times better if you're already interested or you feel a connection with the material already. You're going to do 100% better. I also think you mentioned grades in at Georgia Tech, and I think any STEM school, you have to be okay with grades that are not perhaps what you used to be getting in high school. I think it's part of a STEM education, and I would tell any student, don't let a low grade dissuade you from continuing with the program. It doesn't mean that you're not good at what you're trying to do. You're still learning. It takes practice, and you have to figure out kind of your problem solving as you're doing it. And I think tech schools like Georgia Tech and others are trying to build that skill in you. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think and I saw this question, I kind of answered your question as well as a question in the meeting chat of what's the main objective of industrial engineering and why. I think I know I keep talking about effective, like making things more efficient, but efficiency leads to a lot of different results, whether it's cost reduction or just like understanding how can we make something cost less because the way we're doing it now is too cost effective, or sustainability. If that's something I'm personally passionate about, sustainability and how can we make things not waste natural resources. So um, I just think what really drew me into industrial engineering and engineering as a whole is that it's so versatile and there's so many places where you can help. And I picked sports because I cared about sports, right? But I think in engineering and just processes as a whole is what gave me the foundation to hopefully help in a lot of different departments. So I think engineering gives a lot of people the flexibility and the skills, the problem solving skill set that they need to succeed in any job. So I hope that answered your question, but also why I think I'm biased towards engineering and why I think it's a skill set that's needed.
Yeah, was there sort of a class or a moment or a teacher that really helped you make that decision along the way? Like, a student, Kilani, asked, what moment in your life was the one where you knew engineering was the career path you were sure of pursuing?
That's a really good question.
It is.
Oh yeah, I have to think about that one. I will say naturally, I talked about my teacher Ryan Van Ploot, Mr. Van Ploot, who believed in me. Um, why did I'd say probably the most meaningful project would probably honestly, I think statistics as a class made me really understand like, oh wow, there is so much that goes into like why we do certain things. A specific project, I'll mention a project I'm doing at the W right now, which is trying to understand um the behaviors of certain fans and myself and seeing like what leads a ticket purchase, like what leads to the actual result of a ticket purchase. Is it viewership? Is it that they went to a game, like what exactly, or that they bought merchandise, like what leads into that. I thought that was really fascinating because I myself am a fan and I've naturally bought like this jersey, right? But like what actually led me to buy that? Was it because I saw Trey Young make a game winner? Was it because I thought this color was cool? I thought that was something that was kind of really interesting to look at from a project. So meaningful in a sense, I think it was meaningful in a way where it was relatable. Like I was a fan, and now analyzing fans is something that I'm like passionate about right now. So, and I think the skill set of like what I've learned with data analysis all stems from my statistics class in high school and college. I know we talked about this earlier, Joanna, about linear algebra and how I hated that class so much. But into my day to day now with building machine learning models, a lot of linear algebra is used with your independent and dependent variables, response variables. So I think there are a lot of classes where I would try to I wish I took linear algebra with the approach of learning versus trying to get a grade. And that's one of my biggest advice for students is actually try to learn versus trying to get a grade. Ideally, the grade comes with the learning, but you'll view class a lot differently if you see it as like an opportunity versus something you have to do.
Yeah, it sounded like you sort of had this really big growth moment in early years in high school where you were like, I'm not doing well and I've got to figure out how I got to change some things. And I was wondering, what did you find some things about yourself? Did you find some tools that worked for you? And would any of those be valuable for our students to hear about?
Yeah, I would say it was probably what did I realized it was not it was more effort than anything else. And I feel like I had a realization that like Spanish one, for example, I refer to that, but that was a class that was the easiest class in our school. I'm not saying Spanish one is the easiest class at all, but at our school, I was the only one who ever failed that class in the history of the school. I hopefully have that record to this day. But when I had that happen to me, I realized like, wait, there's something here where it's not about the content, it's more about the effort and trying. Unfortunately, it took moments of embarrassment and lack of self-confidence to get to that point. But I think real looking myself in the mirror and realizing like, okay, you can do this, but you're clearly just like your priorities are not right now. And if you want to achieve what you want to achieve, then you have to switch things up. And I think that and moments of people doubting, like teachers doubting or anyone doubting, made me push myself harder. But yeah, I would say just the failures naturally. It sounds cheesy, but it really is. Like when you do feel so low and feel like everyone's much smarter than you kind of force yourself to react either positively or negatively. And luckily, knock on wood, I responded positively, but I'm still learning every day. You know, I'm not a finished product. I am still learning to this day.
Absolutely. I think we all are. And but really great advice. And I don't know, it seems like you have some very powerful inner strength that you were able to draw from. I I definitely had some imposter syndrome when I went from my school to Georgia Tech, and it took me a while to adjust. And I think something that I found helpful was that engineering is a very collaborative um, discipline, and finding people that support you and that you work well with are really important as you're entering into this. And I had students that I worked with to do problem sets with, and students that I could talk things over with. I was a little shy about going and visiting my professors, but as an educator, I've continually tell my students to go see their teachers and talk to their teachers. So I don't know, did you have any tips in addition to all the great ones you've given us about perhaps the day to day while you're going through your classes in engineering school?
Yeah, I think you brought up a fantastic point on like talking to your teachers because I feel like I always talk to teachers when I needed their help, which is I would like I was like, oh, I got a D on this test. Is there anything I can do to bring it up? But I wish I actually got to know the teachers personally to before it gets to that point. Because I realized with all my meetings with teachers, the ones I knew the best were the ones like when I came to an office hour, for example, even when I didn't need anything and just introduced myself, those are the ones where I felt more excited to go to that class as well. So um, just getting to know your teacher. I think teachers also appreciate the students who want to know them personally, because I keep saying that we're all people and we all enjoy helping people, and we also enjoy like being helped at times. I remember there are certain teachers where I created this stigma for myself. Like it didn't actually exist, but in my head I was like, oh, I'm not doing well in this class, I can't ask them for help. But in reality, they would have 9 times out of 10, they would have been happy to help. So I think my biggest advice, I keep saying biggest advice, but I think it's really important to get to know your teacher. Just introduce yourself. Even if it's like a 2-minute engagement, I think that means a lot for them and for yourself. Go to, you're gonna want to learn from someone who you actually like know or feel like you know and get to know. So that's one of my pieces of advice, like get to know your teachers and enjoy learning and worry about learning more than the final grade, because you can have a 2.23 GPA and achieve your goal, your dream. So try your best not to focus too much on the number and care more about what you actually learn.
So true. And I think you talked a little bit about your experience. You talked about internships, but I loved how you talked about not to underestimate the value of those and the skills that they teach you. That's sort of skills that are apart from school, like your Ross job and your Apple job. You learned how to engage with the customer. You learned, perhaps you even learned a little bit about what pulled them into the store, and maybe that's helping you even today. So I would say the same thing. I feel like I've had some pretty simple part-time jobs. I did a number of things working through college, and all of them I think have helped in my people skills and my managing my time skills, all of those kinds of things. So don't underestimate the power of a part-time job, no matter where it comes from. So
I'm gonna ask you, do you have a specific part-time job that really think helped you become who you are today?
that's such a great question. I started working in the sandwich shop at my school before I transferred to Georgia Tech, a deli called Shenanigans. And so I was working behind the counter and I was making sandwiches and stuff like that. But I kept working there for I started when I was a sophomore and I worked all the way through. And I kept getting more and more responsibility. So I became at night they would have live bands. And so at night I started to be able to be the one that was choosing the bands and booking the bands. And then ultimately I was kind of like the manager and in charge of closing and things like that. So I think I got to see in a short amount of time both I was learning a lot about time management and managing my schoolwork and a job, but I also got to know a wider community. We heard from Annie and Romina about how when you go to college, you get to know this much wider community. And that was so true of that sandwich shop, which brought in all different kinds of people from all over the area. So I got to know a lot of the people who weren't affiliated with the school I went to. And then I think some people skills too, and maybe also some building of confidence, booking a band and doing things like that built some confidence. So I would say that really helped me help pave the way for that big jump up in confidence I was going to need when I transferred to Georgia Tech.
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a good point on time management and being able to work with different people. To this day with the W, whenever I pass, or even with the MBA, when I pass like Adam Silver, I get nervous, make sure I'm walking straight, make sure I'm not on my phone. But I think there's still that uncomfort of like, oh, is this okay? And I think a lot of those skill sets that from part-time jobs from yourself or different opportunities really help me feel like I belong here. And I think that's what's really important. Like I think we all face imposter syndrome at some point in our careers or even in school, but remind yourself that you're here for a reason. And I know a lot of the times, even for like this chat, I was like, am I qualified to do this? But I had to remind myself, like, no, you're here for a reason. This isn't, you keep, a lot of the times I was thinking that, oh, I just got lucky that I got into Georgia State and then I got into Georgia Tech and I got this job. I still to this day sometimes feel like I've been really lucky. And I think there has been a lot of luck, but there's also a good reminder that we all should have is like, hey, we're all here for a reason. Every little thing we've done, every little moment has hopefully helped us in some way experience, whether good or bad, we learned something from it. So imposter syndrome, we all have it. But keep pushing and understanding that we belong, we're here for a reason is something that I really believe in personally. So
Yeah, and you've said it so beautifully. And I think it's such important advice for anybody, no matter your age. And you absolutely belong here, Akib. We're so lucky to have you speaking with us today. So as we begin to close, we're getting coming up on time. Do you have a meaningful project you've worked on so far? We had a student talk about that, and you've talked about a lot of really important projects, but is there one that's meant a lot to you in particular?
no, it's gonna sound silly, but I actually take a lot of pride in the podcast. I know like that isn't necessarily like an engineering um project per se, but I think that gave me a lot of confidence. Like I can just do, I have control of what I create and build. And I think that naturally, like even though the 27 likes are all from my friends, the fact that I still like executed and published it and had fun doing it is something that gave me the confidence saying like, hey, I can problem solve. I can, if I want to do something, let me just do it, and not wait for someone to tell me. And I think those are the projects I'm the most proud of to this day at the W, at the MBA. A lot of the projects I get are now, or I'm responsible for, the ones that I've come up with. And I think that confidence kind of came from that podcast. So I think small projects like that is just what having that confidence to just like chase what you want to do is what makes is the most meaningful to me. It showed me that I can do it and I bring value to what I do. So hopefully that answers.
That does that. And I love that because that's something that came right from you and from your own curiosity, and you didn't wait for somebody to kind of say, hey, we should do this or we should do that. You just figured out how to do it. So, well, I just want to again say thank you so much. And I just want to recall a few key moments because I had so many, but um, I felt like number one, great advice you had. We're all people. We're all just people at the end of the day. So don't be afraid to go and share yourself. I also loved how you talked about um, you didn't you make your goals. You're not you work for a mission driven organization, and that really matters to you. It helps. I think that matters to all of us. It helped really makes us get up out of bed and come to work every day. But you also talked about little goals and making those little goals and celebrating those achievements, which I thought was great advice. You talked about curiosity, which I think is so important and a trait of engineers. And it helps us keep figuring out and keep learning about ourselves. You talked about saying yes, and even if you don't know something perfectly, I loved how you added that. You still put yourself out there, and advised us all to be ourselves, be authentic. So I just loved every piece of advice you had, and I thought it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been really incredible and hopefully I was helpful to a lot of students, but thank you again for everyone for allowing me to be here and giving me this opportunity.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Jillian. Sorry. And I was just going to give a big thank you to some of our helpers today. Should I do that?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to give a big, well, okay. I forgot about that. You had to put the Rizzler on there. Um, thanks so much to our staff engineer, the incomparable Betsy Fortman, and to Dylan and Lonnie, our college mentors who helped out in the breakout rooms, and for all the students who engaged and really worked hard. And I hope you'll continue to work on this challenge and enjoy it so much. And then I really want to thank Annie and Romina, who were so helpful in giving us a sense about what it's like to be in college. And then finally, we've got to give one more big hand to Rakib, Mr. Rakib Jamil. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
That was a great recap too, Joanna. Rakib, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much for your honesty, your humor, and we really just enjoyed listening to you, your words of wisdom. And I know that you reached so many students on this call and also those that will watch the recording. So thank you for that message and reminder to believe in yourself and value yourself. It was really important and on time. Joanna, you were amazing, as always, phenomenal. Thank you for leading this day. Teachers and students, you were the stars of the show. Thank you for working hard in the breakout room and sharing with us. And congrats to the student who got DoorDash for lunch. Yes. Please join us. I believe next up is a big one. All of them are, but March 4th, we have Astrodynamics special event, and we have an active NASA astronaut coming and talk to us. I don't think he can touch Rakib, but let's give him a shot, right? Thank you so much. You all have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Fill out those exit tickets.